All right, let's dive into daily life in North Korea. You guys sent us this YouTube video from Dhruv Rathi, so we're going to break down some pretty wild stuff about this famously secretive nation. And this isn't just going to be about politics, though.
Right. We're going to really give you a sense of how their ideology shapes every single part of life there. I mean, we're talking about the government controlling clothes, hairstyles, even what you watch on your phone, stuff we never even think twice about here.
Okay, so before we go too deep, like, where is North Korea even? Like, what's the basic vibe?
Well, geographically, you'll find it right up above South Korea, sharing a border with China. But there's something kind of eerie about it. Like you see these satellite images of the Korean peninsula at night, like
Yeah.
South Korea all lit up, China too, obviously, but North Korea almost completely dark.
Wow, that's a pretty crazy visual. So it's really a land of darkness. What's the deal with that?
Yeah, well, it really shows you the energy crisis they're dealing with. Limited electricity means most people go to bed early, and their lives are just, well, they're without a lot of the things we take for granted. But here's the thing, it wasn't always this way.
Okay, now you've got my attention. You're saying that North Korea was actually doing better than South Korea back in the 80s?
It's true. They actually had a higher per capita GDP than both India and China at the time. Free healthcare, free education, housing, the whole 9 yards. Problem was they were super reliant on the Soviet Union for cheap oil and food, which, well, you can guess what happened next.
Ah, yeah, when the Soviet Union went kaput in the 90s, things must have taken a nosedive, huh?
You got it. Their economy totally crashed. Power stations shutting down led to, well, the energy crisis we see today. Plus, a massive famine hit the country. The U.S. offered aid, but there was a catch.
Let me guess. They had to get rid of their nukes.
Exactly. Dismantle your nuclear weapons program and we'll help.
And they chose the nukes over their people. Wow. I mean, that really says a lot about the Kim dynasty's priorities, doesn't it?
It sure does. We're talking about a family that has held total control for, like, over 75 years now. From Kim Il-sung, then his son Kim Jong-il, and now, of course, the grandson, Kim Jong-un.
So it's not just like having one dictator, it's this whole messed up system they've built, right?
They call it the Songbun system. It's like a three-tiered social hierarchy based on how loyal they think you are to the regime.
Huh?
This literally determines everything in your life, like where you can live, who you can marry, what kind of job you can have. It's crazy. Imagine your whole destiny being decided from the day you're born.
Hold on, break that down a bit. Like, what are these tiers and how does it actually work?
Okay, so at the top you have the core class. These are like the loyal elites. They get all the privileges and access to, well, everything. Then there's the wavering class. These are the people they're kind of suspicious of, so they're constantly being watched. And then you have the hostile class, which is basically anyone they consider an enemy of the state.
Yikes. So if you're labeled hostile, you're basically screwed. No chance to get ahead.
Pretty much. You're stuck on the fringes of society with everyone watching you, constantly looking for any little slip-up. It's all about keeping people in line through fear and, just not giving them any other options. Most of the super loyal citizens, the core class, they tend to be concentrated in Pyongyang.
Ah, Pyongyang, the shiny capital city. Is that basically like a Potemkin village then? A facade to hide the real North Korea?
You could say that.
Yeah.
I mean, they've got modern buildings there and try to project this image of prosperity, but outside the capital, it's a whole different story.
So what about education and work? Do those things fall under the whole Songbun system too?
Absolutely. Education is mandatory there, but it's full of bribery and favoritism. Like, imagine having to bribe your teachers just to get a decent education. And after school, all men have to serve in the military for up to 10 years.
10 years! That's like your entire youth dedicated to the military. What happens after they get out?
The government assigns them jobs, but the wages are crazy low. We're talking like the equivalent of just a few kilograms of corn a month. The whole system is set up to keep people dependent on the state for survival.
How do people even survive on wages that low?
Well, that's where the jangmadang comes in.
Yeah.
Black markets, basically. They popped up after the famine and have become essential for, well, just getting by. And it's mainly women running them.
So these women are running the show, huh? That's pretty amazing considering all the restrictions we've been talking about.
It is. These jangmadang aren't just markets. They're a testament to people's ingenuity and how resilient they are in the face of hardship. Some people even think they could be the spark that leads to real change.
Wait, hold up. How could these markets possibly lead to change in a place as tightly controlled as North Korea?
Well, for one, they show the limits of the state-controlled economy. People are finding ways to meet their needs outside of the system, you know.
And what about the women running these markets? What does that mean for them?
That's a good question. It definitely challenges the traditional gender roles there. It gives them a level of independence they wouldn't have otherwise. They're the ones making decisions, managing resources, and interacting with all sorts of people.
It sounds like these markets are creating spaces for people to connect and share information outside the government's control. But we're talking about a regime that micromanages everything, right? Like your job, your income, even where you can travel within the country. Is there anything they don't regulate?
You'd be surprised. Even your haircut is a political statement in North Korea.
Wait, seriously, there's like a haircut police or something?
Oh, yeah. The government has an approved list of haircuts, 15 for men and 15 for women. That's it. And forget about wearing blue jeans or ripped jeans. That's a big no-no. They see it as a sign of, like, Western decadence. Girls can't even wear red lipstick. They've got these fashion police out there enforcing the dress code.
That's wild. It's like stepping into another world where the government dictates every detail of how you're allowed to look. But it goes deeper than just appearances, right? This is about thought control, too.
Absolutely. North Korea has this incredibly effective system of propaganda and control. State-run media, TV, radio, newspapers, it's all designed to reinforce the narrative that the Kim family are these divine, benevolent leaders.
So it's more about building this cult of personality around the Kims than actually promoting specific policies.
You got it. You see portraits and statues of them everywhere, in homes, public spaces, everywhere. There are all these stories about them doing superhuman feats, and it's all repeated constantly in schools, workplaces, even just casual conversation. It's this nonstop stream of information designed to shape the way people think.
Sounds like something out of Orwell's 1984, like Big Brother watching every move and controlling what you believe. But what happens if you question any of it? What's the punishment for stepping out of line?
Well, that's where the secret police come in. They're the enforcers lurking in the shadows and making sure everyone stays in line.
So people are just living in fear all the time, scared to say what they really think, even to their own families.
Pretty much. And it's not just the secret police themselves. They have this network of informants encouraging people to report on their neighbors, even their own family members. Talk about creating a culture of distrust.
It's really disturbing to think about the human cost of this system. Families torn apart, lives ruined, all to keep the Kim family in power. But we've also talked about these little glimmers of resistance, like the Jangmadang, those black markets where people can connect and share information outside the system. Even in this crazy controlled environment, it seems like there are cracks starting to appear.
Yeah, for sure. And those cracks aren't just in the markets. People are smuggling in USB drives full of South Korean dramas and movies, giving people a peek at freedom and individuality.
So even in the most isolated nation in the world, people are still finding ways to connect with the outside world and experience something different.
It really shows how resilient the human spirit is, even with all the attempts to suppress it. That desire for freedom, for knowledge, for connection, always seems to find a way through.
It makes you wonder, though, how much longer can this system really last, especially with all this information control and isolation?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? As these Jangmadang become more popular and technology keeps chipping away at their control and more people are exposed to the outside world, well, the pressure for change just keeps building.
All right, so we're back, diving deeper into life in North Korea. We left off talking about those little cracks in the system, like those whispers of discontent. Seems like the Kim regime has got some serious challenges on their hands, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. Keeping control with all these new forces popping up is a huge priority for them, and one of their strongest weapons, propaganda.
We touched on that before, but what does that actually look like in North Korea? I mean, sure, I picture the classic propaganda posters, but I'm guessing it goes way beyond that.
Way beyond. Imagine growing up where every single thing you see or hear, TV, radio, newspapers, it's all controlled by the state. Every single story, song, image, it's all designed to make you believe the Kim family is amazing.
So it's less about actual policies and more about creating this, personality cult around the Kims.
Exactly. They're presented as practically gods, capable of anything. There are stories of Kim Jong-un shooting a gun at 3 years old, riding a horse at 5, even stories about him using a shovel to bring his grandfather an entire mountain of apples.
Wait, a whole mountain of apples? Seriously?
That sounds ridiculous, right? But that's the whole point. It's not about logic. It's about creating this feeling of awe and making people blindly loyal. And these stories are everywhere, told over and over in schools, at work, even just in casual conversations. It's like this constant drip, drip, drip of information meant to totally shape how people think.
It's almost like they're trying to control reality itself. It reminds me of 1984, with Big Brother watching everything and deciding what you can believe.
Definitely some parallels there. Remember how we talked about those portraits of Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il that everyone has to have in their homes? Well, there was this case where a woman's house caught fire, and she saved her kids first instead of, the portraits. She got in huge trouble for that. They even denied her kids medical treatment because of it.
Wow, that's just intense. It shows you how deep this ideology goes. But what about those who don't buy it? What if you, question the narrative?
Well, that's where the stick comes in, and that stick is the secret police. They're the enforcers, the ones hiding in the shadows and keeping everyone terrified.
I bet just knowing they could report you for anything, even something like watching a South Korean drama, must be insanely stressful.
Oh, for sure. Watching or sharing foreign media, that's a major crime there. There have been teenagers sentenced to hard labor for years just for watching a South Korean drama. Public executions happen for people who share foreign movies or music. It sends a pretty clear message, step out of line and you're in big trouble.
So basically, it creates a culture where everyone's self-censoring, right? Too scared to say what they really think, even to their own family.
Exactly. And the secret police, they rely on this whole network of informants, encouraging neighbors to rat each other out, even family members being pressured to betray each other. It's a system built on distrust.
It's heartbreaking to think about what all this does to people. Families torn apart, lives destroyed, and all to protect the Kim family's power. But we have seen some signs of pushback. Remember the Jangmadang, those black markets? They're not just about survival, but also about connection and sharing information.
That's right. There are these little bubbles of freedom where people can relax a little, connect with each other without the regime watching every move.
And it's not just the markets. Those smuggled USB drives full of South Korean dramas and K-pop are making a difference too. It's giving people a taste of a totally different world.
Think of it like a window into a reality they're not supposed to see. A world with freedom, individuality, and, prosperity. It challenges everything they've been told and makes them question things.
Yeah, in this digital age, it's almost impossible to completely control information, isn't it? Even in a place as isolated as North Korea.
Exactly. It's a losing battle, and it's made even worse by the rampant corruption. People are realizing they can bribe their way out of trouble. The rules aren't as solid as they seem.
So when the system seems rigged and people can just pay to get around the rules, it creates this feeling of, cynicism, right? That can't be good for the regime.
Definitely not. It undermines the whole system and makes people even more unhappy. They start realizing the rules don't apply to everyone, that the people in power are just abusing their positions.
Okay, so we've got this growing awareness of the outside world, a black market that's booming, a generation raised on smuggled media, and a system full of corruption. Sounds like the perfect recipe for change. But what kind of change? Are we talking about an actual revolution?
Well, predicting the future is always tricky, especially with a place like North Korea. But it really does feel like things could change in a big way. The question is, will it be sudden and explosive, a slow, gradual shift, or will this slow burn just keep going?
I imagine the Kim regime is going to fight tooth and nail to stay in power.
Oh, absolutely. But they can't control everything. These forces for change, they're already happening and they're getting stronger.
So what does all this mean for the people actually living in North Korea? After all this, I'm honestly left feeling hopeful, but also really worried for them.
It's a tough situation, no easy answers. The future's uncertain, but one thing's for sure. People are incredibly resilient. Even with all this oppression, they find ways to adapt, to resist, to create a better life for themselves and their families.
This whole deep dive has been a real eye-opener. It reminds you how important freedom is, how important access to information is, and how powerful human connection can be, even in the worst possible circumstances. Makes you think about the freedoms we take for granted, and how crucial it is to stand up against injustice, no matter where it is.
I couldn't agree more. North Korea's story isn't just about some faraway dictatorship. It's about all of us, really. It reminds us that the fight for freedom and dignity is happening everywhere, and that even in the darkest places, hope can exist.
All right, back for the final part of our North Korea deep dive. Man, it's been a wild ride so far. The Kim dynasty, the propaganda, that whole surveillance state thing, it's pretty intense. But, we've also seen those little glimmers of hope, those signs that maybe things are changing.
Yeah, that's what we need to look at now. What's next for North Korea? Will those cracks in the system get bigger, or can the Kims hold on to power?
We've talked about a few things that could really shake things up, like those zhangmadang, those black markets. It's like they're creating this whole other economy in society, right?
Totally. And don't forget, it's mostly women running them. They're the ones driving this whole underground economy, making the decisions, building networks, and exposing their families to different ways of thinking.
So, could these women actually be the ones to bring real change to North Korea?
It's possible, definitely. Think about it. They're the ones dealing with the failures of the state-controlled economy every single day. They see the shortages, how the system can't take care of their families, and they're often the ones exposed to information from the outside world through smuggled goods and all that.
Speaking of smuggled stuff, those USB drives full of South Korean dramas and K-pop, even foreign movies, those seem to be having a huge impact.
It's like a window into a world they're told doesn't exist, a world with freedom where you could be yourself, where there's prosperity. It makes them question everything they've been taught.
It's like you can't really control information anymore, can you? Not even in a place as shut off as North Korea.
It's a losing battle for sure. And then you've got corruption just running rampant, making things even worse for the regime. People realize they can bribe their way out of trouble, that the rules aren't really rules.
So when the system's rigged and people can just pay to get around it, can that make everyone super cynical?
Yeah, and it makes the whole system look weak and untrustworthy. People realize the rules don't apply to everyone, that the powerful people are just abusing the system.
Okay, so we've got all these things happening. People are more aware of the outside world. The black market's booming. A whole generation is growing up on smuggled media, and the whole system's corrupt. Sounds like change is coming. But what kind of change? Are we talking revolution?
Well, it's hard to say for sure what'll happen, especially in North Korea, but it does seem like big changes are coming one way or another. Is it going to be a sudden explosion or more of a gradual shift? Or will it just be this slow burn that keeps going?
I can't imagine the Kim regime is just going to sit back and let it all happen.
No way. But they can't control everything. Change is already happening and it's gaining momentum.
So what does it all mean for the people who live there? I gotta say, after this whole deep dive, I'm hopeful but also kind of worried about them.
Yeah, it's complicated. The future's uncertain, but one thing's for sure, people are strong. Even with all the oppression, they find a way, they adapt, they resist, and they try to create a better life for their families.
This whole thing has been a real eye-opener. It really makes you appreciate freedom, having access to information, and just how powerful human connection is, even in the toughest situations. It makes you think about the freedoms we take for granted and how important it is to fight against injustice, no matter where it is.
Absolutely. What's happening in North Korea isn't just about them, it's about all of us. It shows us that the fight for freedom and dignity is something we all share, and that even in the darkest places, there can still be hope.
And that's a message worth remembering, no matter where we are in the world. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into North Korea. We hope it gave you a new understanding of this complicated place.